In Lesson 5.8, Day 1, you will be calculating the percent of change. It'll either be an increase or decrease. Percent of change is equal to the amount of change compared to the original amount. To do this, you find the amount of change by subtracting the two amounts, and then you divide by the original amount, and then the last step is to move the decimal 2 places to the right to make it a percent. Example 1 says last year the yearbook club at Wesley Middle School sold 174 yearbooks. This year they sold 200 yearbooks. Find the percent of change, round to the nearest tenth if necessary, and then state whether the change is an increase or decrease. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to figure out the amount of change. You find the amount of change by subtracting the two amounts, and I always do the biggest one minus the smallest one. So 200 yearbooks minus 174 yearbooks. And then you're going to compare that to the original or starting amount. So we would want last year's amount of 174 in the bottom. So 200 minus 174, that's 26. And then we're going to divide that by 174. 26 divided by 174. It's a real ugly number on the calculator, so I'm just going to write down the first few digits. Now we want to write it as a percent, so we're going to move it 2 places to the right. And then it says to the nearest tenth if necessary, so it's going to be 14. And we're going to keep this a 9 since the number after the 9 is less than 5. So we're going to say 14 and 9/10%. And then this was an increase. It was a 14.9% increase because it started at 174 yearbooks last year, and this year it was 200, so the number of yearbooks went up, therefore it's an increase. You may want to try number 2 on your own. It says, on average, Kentucky has 45 inches of rainfall per year, but in 2006 it had almost 54 inches. Find the percent of change. State whether the change is an increase or decrease. So we're going to subtract the two amounts, the big one minus the small one, and compare that to the original, or in this case the average. The average rainfall was 45. So 54 minus 45, that equals 9. And then we're going to divide that by 45. One of the most common mistakes students make with these problems is they just get to this far and stop. But remember, we need to write it as a percent. So 2/10 is 20%. And in this case, it was an increase again, because the new amount was more than the average. So 20% increase. You may want to pause the video and try these last 4 on your own, and then play it again to check your work. It says find each percent of change, round to the nearest tenth if necessary. State whether the percent of change is an increase or decrease. So I'm going to just take the old and new amounts and subtract them to find the amount of change. We're always going to put it over the original amount, or the beginning amount, which was 6. So 10 minus 6 is 4. 4 divided by 6 is 0.6 repeating. Now to make that a percent, you're going to move the decimal 2 places to the right, and that's going to be 66 2/3%. And it went from 6 to 10, so that was an increase. Next we have 80 water bottles was the start, and we ended with 55 water bottles. So the amount of change is going to be 80 minus 55. Over the original amount, which was 80. 80 minus 55 is 25. Divide that by 80. Now change it to a percent by moving the decimal 2 places to the right. So 31.25%, or to the nearest tenth, it would be 31.3%. And this time it went from 80 to 55, so that's going to be a decrease. 31.3% decrease. All right, the original was 15 meters, the new is 6 meters. So to find the percent of change between those two things, it's going to be 15 minus 6 will be your amount of change over the original, which is 15. 15 take away 6 is 9. 9 divided by 15 is 6/10. So as a percent, that last step, it's 60%. And it went from 15 to 6, so it was a 60% decrease. And the last one, the amount of change is going to be 3 5/10 minus 1 25/100 over the original amount, which was 1 25/100. So 3.5 minus 1 25/100, that's going to be 2 8/10. We have to make it a percent. 280%. Wait a minute, we're going to back up here. That doesn't make sense. I think I typed in the wrong amount. Hold on. 3 5/10 minus 1 25/100, that's going to be 2 25/100 divided by 1 25/100. Okay, it started to miss a step in there somewhere. And that's going to be 1.8, or 1 8/10, which means that's going to be 180%. 180% increase because it went up.